There's a certain kind of machine that doesn't just move people. It changes how they move, how they see themselves on the road, and how an entire generation defines style. Picture the gleam of chrome under a summer sun, the low hum of an engine tuned more for rhythm than for roar, the feeling of motion that's somehow both effortless and electric. It's not about speed or power alone. It's about presence, the way a design can stand for freedom, elegance, and possibility all at once. Some machines arrive quietly, only to become icons. They slip into a culture and end up rewriting what it means to ride. And decades later, we still look back and ask, how did something so small make such a big impact? Stick around as we explore one of those legends from the golden age of mobility. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us which classic you want to see next. The Vespa GS160 arrived in 1962 with a simple goal: to be the most advanced and elegant scooter its maker had ever built, and to project that confidence far beyond Italy's cobblestone streets. It wasn't born in a vacuum. Post-war Europe was rediscovering movement, and America was obsessed with automobiles that stretched wider, lower, and louder each year. Into that world rolled a small, sculpted silhouette on two 10-inch wheels, powered by a single-cylinder two-stroke engine that produced just enough thrust to feel alive without ever intimidating its rider. The GS160 wasn't about horsepower, it was about harmony, a balance of engineering and artistry that made even short rides feel cinematic. When designers reimagined the steel monocoque frame, they weren't chasing numbers, they were chasing grace. Every curve served both strength and style, from the tapered leg shields to the sweeping side panels that seemed to inhale motion. Owners noticed. This was a scooter that made practicality aspirational. It was transportation that looked like celebration. And for the Italian company behind it, this model was a turning point. It represented a declaration that scooters could be more than budget mobility. They could be lifestyle statements. But making such a statement required careful trade-offs. The engineers had to stretch the limits of what a 160cc engine could do while ensuring the scooter remained approachable for daily commuters. They integrated a 4-speed manual transmission, improved suspension geometry, and a larger wheelbase for stability. Small technical evolutions that transformed the experience without breaking its friendly character. At a time when Europe's streets were congested and America's cities were expanding, this mix of lightness and poise was quietly radical. Yet beyond mechanics, the GS160 embodied a philosophy. Its very shape told a story of optimism. The idea that function could coexist with romance, and that design could inspire joy rather than just utility. That vision resonated especially with young professionals, artists, and students who wanted to move differently, to stand apart from the noise of traffic without rejecting modern life. In that sense, the GS160's elegance was democratic. It invited riders to participate in style rather than just observe it, giving anyone with a license and a sense of adventure a front-row seat to Italian craftsmanship. For many Americans, encountering it for the first time meant seeing a new definition of sophistication: minimal, effortless, and cosmopolitan. Dealers began to appear in coastal cities where imported coffee, art films, and European design were starting to reshape culture. This wasn't a coincidence. The GS160 fit perfectly into a changing post-war mood, one where travel and self-expression were becoming as valuable as possessions. Riding one felt less like commuting and more like curating your own soundtrack through the city. It stood apart from domestic motorcycles that equated identity with displacement or noise. Instead, the GS160 whispered its confidence, and that subtlety was its power. For those who owned one, maintenance became a kind of ritual. Simple, direct, almost meditative. You could tune it yourself, polish its bodywork to mirror shine, and feel connected to the same lineage that zipped through Rome's narrow lanes. Its design wasn't just beautiful, it was teachable, approachable, human. And that accessibility would become part of its lasting charm. Still, for all its polish, the GS160 carried ambition far beyond aesthetics. It represented an industrial pivot for its maker, a test of whether innovation and tradition could coexist. The company's engineers had cut their teeth designing aircraft before the war. They knew how to build light, strong, aerodynamic structures. The GS160's frame borrowed from that knowledge, wrapping the engine inside the body for a sleeker silhouette and improved stability. This made it feel planted in corners yet smooth over rough pavement, a revelation in an era when most scooters rattled like tin toys. And then there was the sound. Riders often described it as musical, not mechanical. The soft, steady pulse of combustion filtered through an exhaust tuned for civility rather than aggression. That tone became its signature, a kind of audible design language that told the world this was no ordinary commuter. It invited admiration without demanding it. But under that serenity lay a complex network of choices, metallurgy tuned for resilience, gearing calibrated for urban agility, and ergonomics designed to fit a wide range of riders. Every decision reflected a philosophy of empathy, engineering not just for performance but for pleasure. And pleasure mattered, especially in the early 1960s when the Western world was redefining leisure. People wanted machines that looked good parked outside cafes, that reflected their taste as much as their practicality. The GS160 delivered that in spades. Even its color palette, soft silvers, elegant whites, and understated blues, spoke of refinement rather than excess. For a generation hungry for authenticity, it felt like truth on wheels. Yet the GS160's introduction wasn't without risk. Building a scooter positioned as premium meant convincing a skeptical audience that smaller could mean better. In the United States, that was an uphill climb. Motorcycles were already niche, and scooters even more so. But something about this particular model began to crack that wall. Maybe it was the way it glided past gas stations without fuss, or the way it slipped through traffic like a dancer. Maybe it was its quiet defiance of conformity. Whatever the reason, it began to find a foothold among those tired of chrome excess and muscle car bravado. It offered a different kind of freedom. Not the roaring escape down an empty highway, but the graceful glide through life's everyday corners. That quiet revolution was just beginning, and its ripples would soon reach far beyond city limits. As demand grew and the GS160 started appearing in movies, magazines, and suburban garages, its reputation began to evolve from novelty to necessity. It became a shorthand for effortless cool, a passport to the European way of living, without needing a transatlantic ticket. But that transformation, and the cultural storm it would ignite, is where the story deepens next. The Vespa GS160 became more than a scooter. It became a conversation between continents, a cultural bridge that carried Italian artistry into the American mainstream. By the time it appeared in coastal showrooms and Hollywood films, it had already conquered much of Europe. What changed everything was how it resonated with young Americans searching for individuality in an era of uniform cars and suburban repetition. The GS160 offered a different visual language: curved steel instead of angular chrome, quiet agility instead of brute force. For riders, it wasn't rebellion, it was refinement. In that sense, it stood out not by shouting, but by whispering with confidence. Its influence began to radiate through fashion, film, and even advertising. Photographs of riders in tailored jackets and sunglasses replaced the image of grease-stained mechanics. Magazines featured the GS160 as a design object, not just a vehicle, aligning it with mid-century furniture and architecture. This aesthetic shift redefined what a machine could represent: mobility as lifestyle, technology as taste. Competing manufacturers noticed but couldn't quite replicate it. The GS160's appeal wasn't in specs alone, it was in the story it told. Each ride looked cinematic, whether down the Amalfi Coast or across California's Pacific Highway. In a nation where the car symbolized status, this compact scooter introduced a new kind of cool, one born of minimalism, not excess. Yet behind that elegance lay a growing tension. As more riders adopted scooters, traditionalists scoffed, calling them toys or European eccentricities. That only fueled their mystique. The GS160 became the vehicle of outsiders who didn't see themselves reflected in mainstream America. Students, artists, and urban explorers used it to express identity on their own terms. And while many motorcycles marketed rebellion through noise and aggression, the GS160 did it through silence and grace. It subverted the expected, proof that sophistication could be its own rebellion. Meanwhile, mechanics and enthusiasts discovered its mechanical honesty. Beneath the polished exterior lay an engine simple enough to service in a backyard, but advanced enough to reward attention. The 4-speed gearbox delivered seamless control, the 2-stroke heart offered immediate response, and the aerodynamic design meant less drag and better efficiency. For tuners, that simplicity became a playground. They began experimenting, refining carburetors, adjusting exhausts, pushing output slightly higher without sacrificing civility. Each modification was an homage to the original engineering discipline rather than an act of defiance. Still, the GS160's rise coincided with shifting winds in the market. America was doubling down on car culture. Highways were stretching across states and gas was cheap. Scooters, elegant as they were, had to fight for space both on the road and in the imagination. Yet the GS160's resilience came from its niche appeal. It didn't need mass adoption, it needed devotion. Clubs began to form, small gatherings of riders who shared not just a machine, but a worldview. They met in parking lots, downtown cafes, and university quads, comparing chrome mirrors and stories of rides that felt like poetry. This communal spirit echoed across Europe and the UK, eventually fueling the mod movement where fashion, music, and scooters intertwined. Even in the US, echoes of that culture flickered through college towns and bohemian neighborhoods. For every detractor calling it impractical, there was someone who saw it as art in motion. The GS160 inspired a countercurrent of design appreciation, making industrial beauty accessible to anyone with passion and a spark of curiosity. Its image traveled faster than its top speed. Advertising campaigns painted it as an emblem of cosmopolitan life. No other scooter of its era captured that blend of utility and aspiration so completely. And as the 1960s rolled forward, this modest 160cc icon became shorthand for a lifestyle untethered by convention. Still, success brought challenges. With popularity came imitation. Other manufacturers scrambled to create lookalikes that lacked the GS160's finesse. Some were faster, some cheaper, but none carried its charisma. Meanwhile, regulations on emissions and safety began reshaping the industry, especially in the US. The two-stroke engine, once a symbol of simplicity, faced growing scrutiny. The same qualities that made the GS160 light and lively now made it vulnerable to changing laws. Sales dipped, and by the late 1960s, the automotive world seemed to move on. But something about the GS160 refused to fade. It lingered in memory, in photographs, in family garages where it sat under dust covers waiting for rediscovery. Decades later, collectors and restorers would bring it back to life, not just as a machine, but as a statement. The fascination persisted because the GS160 never relied on trends. It defined them. Its impact could be seen in how later scooters borrowed its cues: the swooping lines, the clean geometry, the balance between elegance and approachability. Even modern electric scooters owe a quiet debt to its design ethos.
The idea that mobility could be beautiful, that efficiency could feel romantic, started here.
Its legacy wasn't confined to transportation. It influenced how people thought about motion itself. In film, the GS160 became cinematic shorthand for carefree travel, forever associated with youth, discovery, and the charm of European summers. In advertising, it represented aspirational minimalism long before that phrase existed. And in design circles, it became an enduring case study of how form and function can coexist without compromise. But legacies aren't built only on nostalgia, they're built on relevance. The GS160 remains relevant because it captured a universal truth: that mobility isn't just about where you're going, but how it feels to get there. It proved that even in a world obsessed with speed, there's room for grace. The next part of the story explores how that grace evolved into a timeless blueprint, one that continues to inspire riders, designers, and dreamers today. The Vespa GS160 endures not simply because it was beautiful, but because it redefined what beauty meant in motion. As decades passed and technology sprinted ahead with larger engines and digital dashboards, the GS160 remained quietly persuasive, a rolling reminder that engineering can have soul. Its steel body, once a product of necessity, aged like sculpture. Its curves spoke the language of optimism. For anyone encountering one today, there's an immediate recognition that this machine was designed for permanence, not planned obsolescence. The GS160 didn't chase trends. It anticipated them, and that foresight has preserved its relevance. When collectors restore one now, they aren't just reviving a scooter, they're reviving an idea that simplicity and elegance can coexist with practicality. The same principles that guided its creation in 1962 guide restoration shops across the world today. They hand-form panels, source period-correct trim, and match paint with reverence, understanding that authenticity is the core of the GS160's magic. Yet what truly gives it immortality is its emotional resonance. To ride one in the modern world is to experience time travel, not backward, but inward. You feel the same connection riders felt 6 decades ago, the harmony between human scale and mechanical rhythm. It moves differently from anything else on the road today, unhurried, composed, dignified. And that calm defiance against modern chaos is precisely what draws new generations toward it. Younger enthusiasts who never lived through its original era discover it through social media or at vintage meets, where a perfectly restored GS160 can still stop conversations. Its allure crosses age and geography because it represents something increasingly rare: analog purity. No screens, no electronics, just metal, motion, and memory. The GS160's longevity also underscores a remarkable engineering lesson. Its frame, stamped, welded, and painted steel, was both its skeleton and its skin, eliminating unnecessary bulk and enabling graceful aerodynamics. This principle of integration would go on to influence not only scooters, but also automotive design, where body and chassis unity became a mark of innovation. Even electric mobility startups today echo this thinking, chasing the same blend of strength, simplicity, and style. They may use composites instead of steel, but the DNA is unmistakable. What the GS160 began was a design philosophy that transcended fuel and era. Yet legacy isn't just mechanical, it's social. The scooter reshaped how people interacted with cities. It made urban life approachable, transforming congested streets into invitations rather than obstacles. Riders could park anywhere, sip coffee at a sidewalk cafe, and feel part of the world instead of insulated from it. That spirit of connection, of movement as belonging, remains relevant in the age of climate awareness and micromobility. Every shared scooter program, every electric commuter concept, carries an echo of the GS160's mission: make transportation elegant, inclusive, and human. The difference is that the original did it with charm no software update can replicate. Owners today speak less about performance and more about ritual. The act of kickstarting a GS160, listening to its gentle idle and rolling through neighborhoods that once dismissed scooters as novelties, feels like reclaiming something pure. It's not about nostalgia. It's about clarity. You become part of a lineage that values experience over efficiency, grace over aggression. That's the quiet power the GS160 still holds. Even its imperfections, quirky shifting, light vibration, modest speed, become virtues, reminders that character is born from limitation. The scooters community, too, has evolved. What began as local clubs has turned into a global network of enthusiasts trading parts, knowledge, and restoration techniques. In the US, vintage rallies now attract hundreds of riders, many of them born long after the GS160 left production. They celebrate it not as retro fashion, but as living design. Its continued presence on modern streets, amid SUVs and electric sedans, feels almost poetic. It's proof that some forms of progress don't require replacement, only appreciation. When a GS160 glides by, people look up not because it's loud, but because it's beautiful. That enduring magnetism tells us something profound about design's relationship to emotion. In an age of disposable everything, the GS160 endures because it never pretended to be temporary. Its value lies in the way it makes people feel seen, stylish, and free without needing validation from technology or status. It represents a kind of independence rooted not in speed, but in self-awareness. This final act of the GS160 story isn't about looking back. It's about realizing how far its influence still reaches. Every modern Vespa traces its lineage to this model. Every designer who strives for simplicity over excess owes it a nod. And every rider who swings a leg over its seat inherits a legacy built on craftsmanship, empathy, and elegance. In the end, that's what keeps the GS160 alive. Not just in museums or garages, but in motion. It's still out there, carving quiet lines through city streets, reminding us that style and substance can share the same engine. Its hum is softer now, its riders more reflective, but its message remains unmistakable. Progress is best measured not by speed, but by grace. The Vespa GS160 remains a benchmark for anyone who believes machines can have personality. Even 60 years after its debut, it continues to inspire restoration projects, art exhibits, and design studies across the United States. In practical terms, owning one today means embracing a rhythm unlike any modern scooter. Maintenance becomes meditation, not inconvenience. The parts network, though niche, is robust thanks to dedicated suppliers and enthusiasts who keep original molds alive. Prices have climbed steadily. Pristine restorations can command collector-level sums, while patina-rich survivors are sought after for their authenticity. Yet unlike many vintage vehicles, the GS160 is still usable. Its lightweight frame, modest power, and intuitive handling make it accessible for short commutes and weekend rides, provided owners respect its mechanical tempo. For American collectors, importing a GS160 is a matter of patience and paperwork rather than impossibility. Early models are most coveted for their purity, later ones for their refinement, but all share the same mechanical soul, an engine that sounds like conversation rather than command. Reliability, when properly maintained, is solid. Neglect is its only enemy. The biggest challenge isn't keeping it running, it's resisting the urge to modernize away its character. Every time the GS160 starts, it's a handshake with history, proof that engineering excellence and emotional connection can coexist. In an automotive landscape driven by speed, algorithms, and attention spans measured in seconds, this scooter still invites people to slow down and savor the moment. It doesn't need to prove itself anymore. It simply exists, perfectly proportioned, eternally elegant. And that's its quiet victory. A design from 1962 that continues to make motion feel like art. The Vespa GS160 taught the world that small machines can leave large shadows, that refinement can be rebellion, and that grace never goes out of style. Long after its last assembly line echo faded, it still moves through time as effortlessly as it once moved through traffic. One look, one ride, and you understand why. Some machines earn respect, others earn affection. The GS160 earned both, and that's why it will always matter.